which was held in Spain. And so it's fitting that our first webinar is with Maria from aena. But before we start, I'd like to just hand over to Diego Gonzalez, who, of course, as all of you will know, is the legal counsel for Aeropuertos Argentinos 2000, but sort of for this webinar, more importantly, the president of WALA, just to say a few words on this rather sort of auspicious occasion of the first WALA webinar. Diego, over to you.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you, Alan. Everybody, hello. I am really, really happy to be here meeting you. So let me say a few words in 5 minutes and why here we are. As you know, airport law is not aviation law, and this is why in 2008 in Ciudad Real in Spain, precisely, the first World Conference on Airport Law was held and WALA was born. And since then, each year, the WALA community that we are has held 11 magnificent conferences. Now the pandemic impacts in WALA DNA. In this time, we cannot hold our airport law conference. Anyway, this is not going to be a barrier to share experiences and brainstorm sessions in order to know about the new challenges that we have ahead of us. This is why the WALA board decided to continue developing the purpose of our organizations. And this is why here we are to promote airport law around the world. You all know that as a result of the pandemic, airports, regulators, and authorities has been forced to create new law, policies, or be as much as creative to apply existing policies and guidance in order to adapt a unique and changing circumstances. The new juridical framework can also fundamentally change the way airports operate and do business now and in human beings have not evolved so much. Technology has evolved, but man continues to cry, hate, suffer, and die of love in the Middle Ages. I strongly believe that this is an extraordinary reflection for this time, because technological evolution makes connection easier. However, as people, we still feel and wish as before, as in the Middle Ages. We want to back together, we want to back to the conference, to feel the friendship that we have to build together in all this year. What it means is that although we have adapted ourselves to the new normal, sharing this webinar, changing my adorable Madrid for Zoom, despite everything, we should continue to maintain our feeling of belonging while a community, just as if we met, until we get back together again. That's all from my side. On behalf of the WALA Board of Directors, thank you to you very much for participants. Thanks, aena, again. And that's all. Alan, it's all yours now.
Thank you, Diego. And yeah, I absolutely echo the sentiments of Diego, particularly with regard to getting together again. But this is a very good second best option. But without much of a further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Maria de los Reyes, who's the Deputy Secretary to the Board of Directors of aena, and also head of aena's International Legal Advice and Compliance Group. And we wanted Maria to talk to us about not only the changes in the regulatory environment in Spain, which have been occasioned by this coronavirus pandemic and the subsequent lockdown, but also her experience generally of dealing with lockdown and the pandemic and the changes that this has necessitated, and how they've managed that at aena. Just one very brief housekeeping tip. It's beyond me to juggle raised hands for questions. So if you have any questions, could you just type them in the chat box at the bottom, and I'll give you full credit. And perhaps once the question's asked, if you're the question asker, you can follow it up. But it's probably the easiest way to do it without causing too much disruption. Okay, so without further ado, I hand you over to Maria de los Reyes from aena. Maria.
Thank you, Alan. Good afternoon, everybody. I would first of all like to congratulate the WALA for holding these webinars, and which I think it's very interesting, and it's a good opportunity, even though we cannot all meet together. I haven't got the chance yet to meet you all, but I hope I will in the future do. And also to thank the President Diego Gonzalez and all the board for inviting us to participate in this first webinar. No. Well, what has been happening in Spain in the airports activity, I think it's quite similar, unfortunately, to what's happened in the rest of the world. No, in the aeronautic sector in Spain, the airport sector, and thus aena has been very affected by the coronavirus pandemic and by the global shutdown that has taken place. Since the month of March, the Spanish government has put several measures in place due to the pandemic. The first one, and the most important one, was the declaration of the state of emergency, estado de alarma in Spanish, by means of a royal decree in which they established measures to manage the health crisis situation caused by the coronavirus. This state of emergency has been enforced until the July 21st. And for us as lawyers, it's been quite a complex period, because plenty of other regulations have been established by the government during all this time, and they have deeply affected the aeronautic sector, both directly and indirectly. There have been measures for the economy in general, but also measures that affect that relate to traveling. No. Among those that affect directly to traveling and to the airports, there are some that refer to the people movement and others to border controls. In air transportation, there have been set limitations, prohibitions, and restrictions, even though Spain has not gotten to close its airspace. But there have been the obligation for transportation operators to reduce its total offer up to at least 70%. There has been a ban of direct commercial flights from other countries. The first one from Italy, even before the state of emergency started. And there have also been a ban with traveling between several locations in Spain, for example, between the Peninsula and the Balearic or the Canary Islands. There also have been restrictions as to the entry into Spain only through certain airports that were considered to have the capacity to attend the public health emergencies. All this has affected, obviously, to the airport's activity. But there has also been the people movement and border controls restrictions. No? From the 21st of March, the Spain borders were closed to the non-European Union and the Schengen and non-Schengen area countries, except for some exceptional cases. And at mid-May, this was extended also to the passengers that were arriving from European Union and Schengen area countries, whose access was denied, except also for some exceptional cases. All these regulations have given place to a drastic reduction of air traffic since the month of March, with a traffic collapse of more than 98% in the Spanish airports, and thus of the income from the airports too. Has a stagnation of the activity at our airports, in which the operations have been restricted to basically health and other essential cargo or repatriation and some other critical flights, such as organ transport and things of that kind. And due to this, aena has been obliged to put in place several measures, such as the limits of its liquidity and the control of its expenses, which are all the legal departments very much involved in. There have also been measures put in place to protect employees and the other people that work at the premises and the passengers from the spread of the disease by applying the health recommendations of from the health authorities in Europe and in Spain. Likewise, we have also established some measures to support our clients. These have consisted in the payment deferment without interest of the aircraft parking charges. There have also been discounts to airline handling agents and commercial providers, etc., up to 75% for the real estate assets to agreement, and the airport charges in health cargo flights. There has been too, with regard to the commercial contracts, an agreement by our board of directors, a resolution of the board of directors that was held at the end of the month of April, in which it empowered the company's management to assess the impact on the company's commercial agreements of the health crisis caused by the COVID-19 pandemic and by the measures adopted by the public authorities to tackle it. According to this resolution, the board of directors also agreed to negotiate and approve the amendments to the aforementioned agreements that can be deemed appropriate. And this includes the possibility of amendments in fixed rents and minimum annual guaranteed rents. So these are more or less the measures that have been taken during all this period of the state of emergency. But now the situation, happily or luckily, is changing. And since June 21st, with the end of the emergency state, and even more since the 1st of July, that many of these restrictions are not applicable anymore. Now it is possible to freely travel within the Spanish territory and within the European Union and the Schengen area countries. And also borders have started to reopen to non-European Union and Schengen area countries slowly, and depending on the epidemiologic situation in each of them, taking also into account other reciprocity criteria. No? So there has been, by the government, it has been published a list of 15 countries with which the borders have been open at this moment. No? And the idea is that this can be evolving. I will refer later at the end of my, at the end I will refer more to how we see the near future. No? And how does this affect on aena's activity and on our airport charges and commercial revenues? Well, it is important, first of all, to set the regulation to which aena is subject because of some special characteristics that it has. No, aena is a state-owned company that manages 46 general interest airports in Spain and 2 heliports. We have also participation in other concessions abroad, but now we are making reference to our activity in Spain. Since its creation in 2010, it has have a very important change in February 2015, when the public body enacted that owned 100% of the capital stock sold when Enaire sold the 49% of aena's capital stock in the Madrid Stock Exchange. Due to this, aena is, as I said before, is a state-owned company, a sociedad mercantil estatal. This doesn't mean that aena is a public body, and it doesn't mean that aena is the government. Aena is a corporation, but it's subject to some special regulations due to this characteristic of being a public body, no, a public entity. Besides that, we have the sector in which we develop our activity, which is the airport sector, which is a very regulated sector in Spain. In 2014, the sector's legal and regulatory framework was modified by the Act 18/2014 of October, with the aim of fostering the economic development and competitiveness in this sector. This new framework established the entire aena airport network as a service of general economic interest, as well as it made legal provisions for powers of regulation, oversight, and operation in the public sector in the airport sphere, and made the the airport regulation document, which is called DORA for its name in Spanish, as the 5-yearly regulatory instrument. Through this document, the government guarantees the viability and the competitiveness of the entire aena airport network and its high standards of public service. The DORA, which is actually in force, which is from 2017 to 2021, was approved by the Council of Ministers of the Government of Spain and is the first 5-year regulatory document that arises from the new regulatory framework that was established by the Act 18 from 2014. This DORA defines a series of conditions for the operation of the airport network of aena that will be binding on aena during the period between 2017 and 2021 and gives the managers a predictable regulatory framework for the medium term that will enable them to improve the levels of efficiency and competitiveness in the operation of the Spanish airport. The DORA is based on the principles of the Act 18, which are basically the following. This regulation covers the basic airport services. Those are the services for the aircraft and passengers for which the costs are recovered by public charges. Other services which are not the basic airport services are not subject to DORA. This is a system that is based on the recovery of the expected costs which are associated with the basic airport services and include operating expenses and an adequate remuneration for the assets associated with the provision of those services through the cost of the capital. And the expected costs are those that are considered efficient or at the regulator's discretion. And this is something very important, the principle of efficiency in the management that we have to do of the airports. It also establishes a dual till mechanism in which the costs of the services subject to the public charges will be met solely by the revenue that those services generate. So we cannot mix the airport services with the other services. This is a prospective model that establishes the tariffs from 1 year defined through the anticipated costs and the estimated demand. And the direction of the tariffs may be changed by the manager's performance in terms of quality and fulfillment of strategic investments. So if things are not done correctly, there can be penalties that can affect the tariffs for the future. There are also some principles regarding to the investments in which refer to that they must be feasible, necessary, and are limited to a total annual average investment amount of 450 million euros per year. So, but this only refers to the regulated investments, that is, those that are related to the provision of basic airport services, and the other investments that we call the unregulated investments that are associated with private prices are not covered by the DORA. And there is also a general principle that is that the risk associated with variations in costs and demand that actually occur will generally be borne by the operator. So it's a risk that is borne by aena. According to all these, the Act and DORA, the regulation of the air charges is essentially can be resumed as that in matters of income. The income is in relation to the basic airport services and is considered to be an airport charge. The non-essential airport services, together with the commercial and management of the infrastructures and their development operation, are subject to the free market. aena's income associated to basic airport services will be subject to compliance with a maximal annual revenue per passenger, is what we call the IMAP, the name in Spain, which is determined on the basis of the recovery of efficient costs as recognized by the regulator along with traffic forecasts, as I mentioned before. And for the period from 2015 to 2025, the maximum increase in charges is said to be 0. So there can be no increase in the charges, no, to that extent. DORA, the 2017 to 2021 also sets a reduction of 2.22% per year in the maximum annual passenger revenue for all the 5-year period. And there is also an important principle that comes from the law, and which is that upon completion of the 5-year DORA period, the cumulative tariff deficit together with that they might correspond to previous years cannot be transferred to the next DORA. So the deficit has to be covered during each five years period. So this is the frame that we have in or the regulation for the airport charges. No, as a result from the from COVID, aena has needed to implement several health measures in the airports. On one side, it has implemented the measures for the airports to be safe and to prevent the transmission of the virus within the airport, as is required by the Spanish and the European regulations and recommendations. This means establishing measures for the social distance, the use of face masks, messages reminding everything that needs to be done, the installation of screens, the disposal of sanitizing gels, all these measures that I think we all know already, no? And additional to this, there has been at the beginning of June, there was a decree law that was passed by the government, in which the government establishes the cooperation of aena with the sanitary authorities to put in place health checks at the airports. These health checks that have been implemented from the 1st of July. It is very clear that these controls, health controls, are not controls that are not a responsibility of the airport. The health control and all the sanitary measures are measures from the health authorities. But according to this royal decree, aena has cooperates with the government and the health authorities to implement the controls on arrival. These controls consist in the travels will be subject to provide a Spanish Ministry of Health with the mandatory contact information and any history of exposure to COVID. Doesn't pass this first control, there is a secondary control in which whoever presents some kind of symptom will be seen by a health professional. All this takes place at the airport, and aena is the entity of in DORA, which refers to that the limitation that establishes that the charges cannot be increased is not going to be applicable during the period of recovery. And the second one is that whatever has not been able to be recovered during a DORA period can be transferred to other DORA periods that come afterwards, no? Until these have been recovered. This is very important because this allows aena to reduce the impact of this recovery on the sector. It's not the same if we have to recover all in this DORA period, which is ending next year, than if we have a longer term for that. No? On our side, we have also been working in establishing some kind of incentives to the airlines to boost the air transportation and the tourism. These have been designed based on the international body's traffic estimations, and it is expected that around 70,000 flights will be incentivized in 9 months during the period from July 2020 to March 2021. These amounts could be around 25 million euros, although there is no limit because it's going to depend on the growth of the airlines. There are also commercial issues, commercial incentives for fast track and fast lane to be added, as well as discounts in the leases of the premises that the air companies maintain or contract from now on. aena is also working on a charges policy destined to help the operational recovery and is boosting the tourist sector recovery, in line with the support plan of the Spanish government that has been announced today. It was approved, and there has been a royal decree also approved on Friday, also to support the tourism. On the matter of the non-aeronautical revenue, as I mentioned before, the non-essential airport services, together with the commercial management of infrastructures and the development operation, are not subject to DORA, and therefore this is subject to the free market. And the position in aena is right now that we are acting according to the resolution of the board of directors, and there's been this assess of the impact on the contracts to see what measures need to be adopted, or I mean what negotiation is if there is any negotiation to take place, and this is something that has to be seen case by case. From the government side, although there are some measures that for the support of the tourism, or maybe to support there's been spoken some to support the airlines and to support the economy, there is no specific support from the Spanish government to the airport sector, for its recovery. And just to finish, in what regards to the future provisions that we have, as I mentioned before, the situation has been changing since June 21st, and especially from the 1st of July, and so it has been happening to AENA's activity. From the 1st of July, new spaces and terminal buildings are being reopened, and almost all airports, except for the one at Logroño and Huesca, have started operating as usual. Up to now, they were maybe on demand, or some parts of the airports were closed, and this has changed. In what regards to our future provisions, if the health situation allows for the mobility, we expect that the traffic will recover in a progressive way, although we don't have specific provisions neither for the traffic nor financial, as this is totally new situation for us that we have not experienced before, so we cannot base our provisions on past situations. In a shorter term, in what regards to summer provisions, the airlines programs are also very changeable, so this makes also difficult. But we expect that there can be a progressive recovery during the summer, although we have to bear in mind that during the first weekend of July, there have been about 4,000 operations in the whole network, whilst in the last year there were 13,000. At this moment, what we are more focused is also on applying the measures that are recommended by the Spanish and the European Sanitary and Transportation authorities in order for the airports to be safe and the people to want to travel.
Thank you, Maria. That was really interesting. I mean, two things that I pulled out of that. I mean, there was quite a bit in there, but they were that aena the board has taken a very methodical approach and has been very thorough. But at the same time, this is the second thing. It's such a fluid situation, and it's continuing to evolve. It's evolved. Almost on a daily, certainly a weekly basis historically. But as we're seeing in the UK now, it's evolving on almost a daily basis with local shutdowns. And I guess that's that's going to be the same globally. I mean, we've seen it in the States, with the ebbing and flowing of the outbreaks there. What I did, I've had a couple of questions in which I will ask, and some of them I think you touched on already, so it may just be a case of repeating what you've already said to a certain extent. But the airlines have done a semi-decent job of communicating why it's safe to fly, and it's been through a combination of explaining why, with the HEPA and the withdrawal of air and how regularly that is done, to something as blunt as just it's a cheap flight and people are desperate, and perhaps having a bit of a devil-may-care attitude. But what has aena done from the airport side? Because I haven't seen anything from any airports, and this may be down to me, saying, look, it's safe to come to the airport, because I think for a lot of people the risk really isn't so much on the plane, it's getting to the plane, it's the long delay, perhaps waiting for a test and waiting for a physical examination while being exposed in this sort of confined environment. What has aena done in that regard to getting people back to the airport and through the airport?
Well, the first thing is with, maybe it's not so much communicate. Well, I'm not sure. The first thing is that we have put all the measures in place that have been set for the airport to be safe. I think that's a very important measure, because if the airport is not safe in that sense, whatever you go saying around, it's when the people arrive, they're going to see it's not working like that, and they are going to tell others. From communication,
a couple of questions, if I may. Uh, One, airport shops and non-aeronautical commercial activities at the airport have been severely affected. So the duty-free, for example. Is aena considering implementing contractual mechanisms to help contractors? I think you spoke about the payment deferment to airlines and handling agents, etc. What about sort of concessions and that sort of stuff?
Well, on these commercial contracts, what it's being done is what we have been what was approved by the board of directors, and the management of aena is working with the contractors for review, for seeing on the commercial contracts to see how they have been affected and what measures need to be taken. So that's something that is being done case by case.
Okay. Then I've got one, the recovery of the COVID costs, the impact on the airlines. Where are these, the aena's costs? How are they recouped? Are they recouped via charges to the airlines or via some form of air passenger duty, APD, or, at some point, I'm assuming that aena will want to recoup?
Yeah, well, this is something that is being analyzed now, because the royal decree law it's quite new. It's from the 9th of June. It sets that possibility for aena, and that's what we are working on, studying how this is going to be. So this is going to be done through the DORA. It has to be also bear in mind that it's not aena. It's not for aena only to decide on these things. We are controlled. All this is regulated and controlled. There are several public bodies that participate in all these matters, and it's something that it's going to be defined.
Okay, and then a related question is, does aena have the right to recover via airport charges the costs incurred in relation to sanitary controls?
Well, the royal decree law sets expressly that aena can recover these costs. These costs for the cooperation that it's doing with the health authorities.
And I guess it's a delicate balance, isn't it? Because one is you don't want to hamper the recovery of the airlines, but at the same time you want to make sure that at some point you recover those costs.
I think that this is why this measure that I mentioned about being able to recover these costs in several DORAs is very important, because it can soften it up, and it can be also something that helps airlines,
and of course, I suppose with insolvencies, that will inevitably happen. The apportionment of costs amongst the airlines and the various stakeholders will increase, because there will be less pieces of the pie to be divided amongst. Another question, I read that there was 100% MAG waiver for 2020 on commercial agreements. Could you please confirm?
No, it's not exactly that. What it says, what the board of directors says, is that in this negotiation, it's possible to get to affect the MIG even up totally, but it doesn't mean that this is what is going to be done with every company. It's going to be checked contract by contract, and there is this possibility. And this is what has been agreed by our board of directors.
And then a question from my friend Isabel Leleur, who's well known to everybody. A very good question, actually. One I wanted to ask is or will aena be helped by the Spanish state in terms of taxes to be paid by the company to the government? And the question I wanted to ask was, that of course brings into play all the antitrust issues around state intervention.
Well, we don't foresee anything of that in aena at this moment. No, as I mentioned before, there are no government support for the airports, and at this moment I have no news that something like that is going to take place.
Okay. And so going back to the sanitary and the healthcare costs, does the Spanish regulation establish any method of calculating the recovery of healthcare costs actually incurred? So how do you know how much it's cost?
Well, I have to say I don't have a clear answer to that at the moment. According to how the DORA is regulating and the Act 18 from 2014, the costs have to be efficient, and it's for the regulator to consider what are discretion to consider what are efficient costs. No, but I really don't have the answer of how this is established.
Yeah.
On the Royal Decree Law, there is nothing said on that. It only says that these costs can be recovered.
Well, like so much else, I guess quite fluid. Now, I think that is it. I don't have any more questions coming up on my screen. So thank you very, very much, Maria, for doing that and for responding to those questions, some of which were quite difficult. And I'm just going to do this, which I've managed to do this properly. Thank you all very much for joining. I think we've got something in the order of 65, 70 people that have joined, which is absolutely fantastic and a testament to all of you and WALA itself, actually. Next week, at the same time, we have the second webinar. You'll be subjected to me again, but then that's it from me for the rest of the webinars, as far as I know. And we're going to be talking to Robert Herger from Gatwick and Michael Tegedoff from Munich about how they, in their teams at Gatwick and Munich, respectively, dealt with the virus and putting into place mechanisms and how decisions were made, etc. So very much the in-house legal department's experience of dealing with the pandemic historically, and also how they ramp up again to business as usual. So thank you once again, Maria, and of course Diego and the other members of the board for putting this on and for really informing us, Maria, about how aena has dealt with and is continuing to deal with the pandemic. And thank you, all of you, for joining. As Diego always says, without you, WALA would not be very much at all. It would be 4 or 5 of us sitting around chatting. But it's all of you participants that make it what it is. So thank you very, very much, and I hope to see as many of you as possible back here next week for Robert and Michael talking about the in-house legal team's experience. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.